to Eric, and then do a couple on the phone bridge.
I'm Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Dr. Young. It's hard for me to know how quickly these pictures are coming down. How many would you estimate that have come down so far of the moon? And these luminous flashes on the surface, was that an actual meteor shower, do you think, or is it just your usual business of falling debris?
Yeah, so the team, the FOD team, is working really hard to bring down the images as fast as they can. Of course, we also have other vehicle data that needs to come down as well, but the team is working really hard to try to get those images down and of course, get them out to you guys as well. We, as of the time I left Console roughly an hour ago, there was just over 50 gigabytes of data from yesterday that had come down. Of course, that's not, every image does not exactly have the moon in it, but it is taken from within the lunar observation period. So we're working really hard to get those down, as well as the audio files that the crew were taking. That's a really rich scientific data set because it captures the nuance of what the crew were seeing. You know, we heard a few of those per hour in those science situational reports you were hearing yesterday, but there are multiple hours of recordings of, you know, meaty science observations, about 2/3 of which we've been able to get down so far, and our team has already been looking at that, you know, those couple hours of transcripts and audio files. As for the impact flashes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think they saw at least 4 and possibly up to 6 impact flashes. Again, I talked to them about that just this morning in the crew conference with them. I think, you know, you know, it's very early to tell, right? This happened less than 24 hours ago. Our teams are looking at it now, and spacecraft like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter will be really helpful to try to help us narrow in on that. But the lunar environment is a dynamic place, and we have a lot to learn about it. You know, LRO has returned a lot of information about the lunar environment, but observations like this are a critical part of our understanding, which will pay dividends for future surface exploration.
Eric.
Eric Berger, Ars Technica. There's a question maybe for Jared. So why haven't we been back to the moon in 53 minutes? I'm just kidding. So you brought up the Artemis II mission design. Can you bring up sort of, or talk about the 2 or 3 hardest problems that you're tackling? Sort of, you talked about the mission design meeting today, but sort of the 2 or 3 hardest problems you're tackling right now to make sure that launches next year.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too far out in front of a mission that's underway right now. I would just say that there are a lot of things based on the information we have available today, from feedback from our vendors, that we know are achievable. And I think one of the questions probably will just be what the initial orbit will be for Artemis II. Is it going to be LEO or HEO? And I think that we're all going to have some sense of which one, and there's pros and cons for each of them for sure. We're all going to be able to have some sense about which path we'll likely go down based on launch cadence of our 2 HLS providers, both of which have launches coming up, I would say, in the next month or less right now. So a big key to our strategy, not just to return to the moon, but to stay and to build a base, is going to be rapid reusability of heavy lift launch vehicles. So the more they get experience doing that, the more options that are available for us for Artemis III. But I'd say right now, we certainly have a good plan for that mission. Will help us buy down a lot of risk in advance of a landing for Artemis IV in 28.
Jeff Faust with Space News.
Hi, Jeff Faust with Space News. Question for Dr. Young. Now that you are going to get all of these images and verbal descriptions and annotations, what's the plan for the science team in the days and weeks ahead to go through all of that data and see how they address the 10 science objectives that you laid out for this mission? Thank you.
Oh my goodness, what a good question. We have a lot of data to get through. Like I said, it has already started. We had teams working overnight, you know, after the crew went to sleep, as soon as we started getting data down. You know, I will reiterate that we will be getting all mission data relevant to lunar science archived and made publicly available within 6 months post splashdown. So these are all of the images of the moon, these audio files, and even the annotations. But in the meantime, over those next 6 months, we're also going to be preparing 2 reports that we also owe to be publicly released within 6 months post mission. One is a science operations report that describes, how our team was structured to integrate with flight operations to accomplish our objectives. But relevant to your question, the second one is a post-mission preliminary lunar science report. And so we are going to be going objective by objective with those 10 lunar science objectives you referenced, looking across this entire, really rich, robust, but very large data set, and really trying to understand what data we got relevant to each objective, but set up the community for success so that they can access those data and help us answer these fundamental driving science questions. The lunar science team for this mission, it was our charter to develop the objectives and to maximize the science value out of this mission. We'll be doing an initial assessment over 6 months, and then we're really eager to see what the community is able to do with these data.
We'll move to Ken Chang with the New York Times.
Thank you. So I have some questions about the optical communications. How was the performance like? How many gigabytes was sent? What was the data rate? How does that compare with what was expected? And how does it compare with the usual way of sending data back? And it seems like it's been almost operational already and not just a test. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the question was relative to some of the data rates for the optical communication system. I'll just give you a stat from overnight that we heard from Consul. We got 20 gigabytes down in a little more than 45 minutes. That's orders of magnitude more than we get via our S-band telemetry system. So optical comm has been working really well, and hopefully we can take what we learned on Artemis II and expand its operational capability and its implementation for future missions.
And now we will move to Lauren Grush with Bloomberg.
Out to me yesterday was just the vivid descriptions that the crew used for what they were seeing and how they remained in kind of constant contact and talkative throughout the flyby. I'm wondering if it's possible to say how that might have compared to the Apollo crew observations and how that robustness impacted the science and the data that was collected.
Absolutely. I mean, probably a lot of people watching have spent a lot of time looking back at Apollo and maybe watching Apollo in real time online and reliving what the Apollo crews, not just on the surface, but in orbit experienced. You have, I'm sure, heard the Apollo descriptions of the lunar surface from orbit, and they were also really impactful. They trained heavily in geology and orbital observations, just like the Artemis II crew did. I will say, listening to the level of scientific discourse that the crew was having yesterday was incredibly inspiring. I mean, a testament to how much they prepared before this mission. I heard a couple times Christina and Victor especially saying, when we took the time to actually talk to each other about a specific target that we were both seeing, we elevated each other. We elevated what we were able to pull out of that target. More brains on a scientific target are better than one, and we heard from them directly multiple times that they were helping each other to advance their scientific understanding of what they were looking at. We actually also heard them say, hey, we have a hypothesis. Can you guys provide guidance on that hypothesis, like right now in the middle of our flyby? So the science team was saying, was cross-checking what they were seeing, was reading up geologic ages of major lunar impact features, and it was informing the observations they were making during the flyby. I mean, this is absolutely everything we hoped for by integrating science into flight operations, because, again, science enables exploration and exploration enables science. And the fact that, they're giving observations and, I was able to immediately follow up on those observations with just the quick questions that can enhance science return, it meant that they were evaluating and buying down multiple working hypotheses in real time during their flyby. And just imagining the future when we have crew on the surface for short duration missions and ultimately the moon base, the amount of science we are able to gain when science is woven into this operational fabric is incredibly impactful. And we saw that, for 7 straight hours yesterday.
Now we'll move to Micah Maidenberg with the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good afternoon. For Rick, what is the approximate time on Friday when the crew module separates from the service module, if you have that on hand? The administrator mentioned splashdown is expected for around 8:07 Eastern. And then any color on kind of reentry prep work ahead for the crew and mission control between now and Friday? Thanks.
Sure. I'll start with some of the times. The crew module and service module separation is going to occur about 20 minutes before entry interface. So that separation will be at 7:33 p.m. Eastern Time. We expect entry interface about 7:53 p.m. Eastern Time, with a splashdown around 8:06 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. As for the preparations that the ground and the astronauts are doing today to prepare for entry, or today and future days, a lot of it is all of the science equipment and cameras and tablets and reference material that got unstowed in support of the flyby. Well, we have to put that all away. We have to pack up our suitcases and get ready to come home. And that takes time, and so we are laying out a plan to make sure that the crew gets everything packed away in time to get their suits on and get in their seats to perform that final trajectory correction maneuver on splashdown day and come home.
We'll move back in the room to Joey and then on to Will.
Thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. I just had another quick toilet question. Do you have any idea as to why the venting is not happening as fast as you hope it is? And what other hardware on the spacecraft might that implicate, or what other problems might that cause?
Yeah, so the engineering team is going to go through a full fault tree to identify all of the potential causes of the blockage. Initially, you may have recalled that we thought it might be icing up at the nozzle at the outer mold line of the spacecraft. We have pretty high confidence that it's not an icing condition. We've put the spacecraft in a sun-focused attitude to bake off any ice. We've activated heaters along the lines internal to the spacecraft, and we still see a blockage. And so the latest theory is related to some of the chemistry that goes into ensuring that the wastewater doesn't develop any biofilms. And there may be something going on with a chemical reaction where there's some debris that's generated as part of that reaction, and it's getting clogged in a filter. But again, we don't have root cause, and once we get the spacecraft back into the processing facility in Florida, we'll be able to get access to all the components and do a real detailed fault tree to identify the root cause.
Hi, Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thank you all for taking the time. Going back to Dr. Young's point about the intersection of science and exploration, to both Dr. Young and to Dr. Glaze, given the number of believed to be impact flashes that the crew observed during just a relatively brief amount of time, I wonder how these observations and the ones made previously by LRO will factor into creating the conditions for a moon base that can allow the astronauts to stay safe, given the probability that they may experience a micrometeoroid impact at that site. Thank you.
Want to say anything? Well, I do think that the data that we're collecting with these observations, and as you noted, the LRO data that we're continuously collecting, we have been for quite a while, all of that is being fed into our plans and making sure that we understand what all of the variety of risks are. There's many that we're looking at, and of course micrometeorites being one, as we start to establish infrastructure on the surface and understanding those rates. These kind of data really help inform us as far as what we can anticipate. And of course, the different parts of the moon, down at the South Pole, maybe a little slightly different rates than we would see higher up at higher latitudes. So we need to compile all of those data and understand where, what those impacts might be.
Hi, I'm Nick Natari with ABC 13. A question about the scientific stuff that you found yesterday. I know the question was asked about what was inspirational. I talked to Joel Kearns yesterday, and he had told me, I'm just looking at his quote, as a scientist, I can tell you what's most inspirational is when you're pouring through something you're working on and you realize you're seeing something that nobody else has ever seen before. I know you talked about the impact flashes, but is there anything else that no one else has seen before that you guys have already saw? And then also explain to us on Earth that maybe this is high level over our heads, how what was photographed or taken yesterday could maybe give us some answers on our planet of Earth.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely questions. I might just give a specific example of something I heard from the crew yesterday. My background's in geology and specifically impact cratering, so every time they describe those beautiful basins, I get really excited. They did describe Ohm crater a couple of different times, and they noticed a variety of different color and albedo hues associated not just with Ohm, but with the rays that extend out from the crater. This could indicate, impact events are really compelling for a lot of reasons. Obviously, I'm quite biased, having written my PhD on them. But they can excavate material from great depths below the surface, which means they're kind of like a geologist's cheat code, right? Where you can't get all the way down there by yourself, but when an impact has brought up that material for you, it can actually perform that excavation, and we just need to send the crew to the right spots on the surface, and they can actually look at depths far below the surface. And I bring that up here to say that what the crew observed around Ohm yesterday was they actually noticed color and albedo hues coming out in those rays, and they noticed that they were distinct and different and evolved along the ray systems, which could potentially lead us to believe that that crater excavated from distinct depths below the surface of the moon. So it's those kinds of nuanced observations that can ultimately inform future landed missions, future crewed missions, to understand where can we go to maximize the scientific value. These ultimately get at chronology of the solar system, at how the inner solar system has evolved over time, which connects to the moon being the witness plate for our planet and for the inner solar system. You heard Lori and I the other day get very excited about talking about pesky plate tectonics and oceans and vegetation that gets in the way of us looking at the early part of our planet's past, and the fact that that part of the record of our Earth-Moon system is still available on Earth. Well, where it's available is the highlands, the far side highlands, and the South Pole. Specifically, the South Pole has the South Pole Aitken Basin, which is my personal favorite lunar and planetary science objective. It's the oldest basin in the solar system. If we can get the right age constraints on that basin, it can help us anchor the chronology for the entire solar system. And so crew observing things like they did with Ohm, where they can say, with my eyes, I can see this distinction, which can ultimately tell us that future observations of high priority landing sites could tell us something similar. This is how we start to really bite away at these really, really fundamental science questions that impact not just our understanding of the moon, but how our own planet has evolved over time.
Mark Kirkman with NSF. This is for Rick, while we have you here. I'd like to drill down a little bit on entry day a little more. Sounds like weather in the primary recovery zone is looking favorable, but can you walk through, as we approach EI and pass EI, what redes capability you have, what kind of cross range and down range capability you have, when are you committed to that landing zone? And also, with this thermally benign entry you're going to fly, do you still expect to exceed Apollo 10's speed record? I know you don't care about that stuff, but we do.
That's all right. You can still keep asking the questions, and we'll go follow up, and we'll find the answers. I do not have the answer offhand about the Apollo 10 speed record, so we'll have to get that back to you tomorrow. And tomorrow, I'm actually going to provide a lot of detail about the sequence of events for entry, as I'm the entry flight director for Friday evening splashdown. But with respect to your particular question about entry interface, we can select a new landing site as late as entry interface. We would prefer to not do that. We like to give ourselves a little bit of margin, but we can adjust the latitude and longitude of the site, and the spacecraft will fly to those coordinates so long as we get that command up before entry interface. So we're going to make a decision far in advance of entry interface to know where the splashdown site will be, because our top priority is to ensure that when Integrity and her crew of 4 splash down, that we have the recovery forces right nearby to help get them out and get them back to the recovery ship. So we have about a 475 nautical mile range. I can't do that conversion. But 475 miles of ocean within which we can select the most acceptable weather. And as you said, weather near San Diego looks favorable, so I'm optimistic that we'll be able to land close to the shore.
Tom Clark with Sky News in the UK. First of all, congratulations on the flyby and those breathtaking images, and thanks for doing this too. There's been a lot of focus on the toilet, but I'm looking to get a kind of overall perspective on how happy you've been with Orion and the European Service Module. What are you definitely going to have to fix before you fly it again? And how confident are you looking ahead to re-entry?
I'm not sure I heard the end of the question. You talked about the, how the Orion is performing, and it's performing spectacularly. I have to tell you, our Orion team is so pleased with really everything the way that it's performing. The engines, the manual control that you've heard us talk about several times, that the crew have just gone over and over about how well that's performing, how nicely the Orion crew module is handling. The service module, again, providing everything that we need. Yeah, we've had a couple of challenges, but overall, I mean, I think they're pretty minor in the whole grand scheme of things. The hardware itself performing extremely well. We're really looking forward to turning this around and flying again in a year, and then again a year after that. I think this hardware is really spectacular, and we're really looking forward to doing this more often. We're going to get the toilet figured out. The toilet is actually functioning perfectly. It's the drain, the ability to vent the wastewater. And as Rick said earlier, as soon as we get this down on the ground, we'll be able to get inside, and we will get to the root of that.
Hi, Lisa Grossman from Science News. This is especially for Kelsey, but actually for all of you. The astronauts yesterday used a lot of really fun analogies and descriptors for the features on the moon they were seeing. Did any stand out for you as favorites?
Oh, of like the analogies they used to describe lunar features? Yes, I liked the handprint, and that actually, we had a team working overnight to figure out exactly what they meant. They found it this morning. They were very excited to figure out exactly what they were talking about. I think, we train them, to be totally blunt, we train them to describe it like they see it. Tell us what speaks to you and how you can communicate it back to us. And so I think Christina delivered on that ask when she described a feature as looking like a wound. We do agree. I'm not sure it was my favorite lunar descriptor I heard yesterday, but it was evocative, and she was right. It did indeed look like a wound. And I was also really resonating with the way that several of the crew members were trying to, in the spirit of wanting to have a scientific dialogue, right? They had science questions they were trying to answer, and they were asking us some pretty sophisticated questions real time. And so to bring us with them on what they were seeing, the way that they were cluing us in to how they were moving across the moon by saying, take this feature, draw a line from that to this, and then continue going, and this is the feature we're looking at. Help us use that as a waypoint. It was an incredibly impactful way to have our team be ready to very quickly provide them with answers to the science questions, which is, again, important, not just because, of course, we want to support our crew at the moon, but when we can respond quickly and understand what they're looking at, it maximizes science, because we can immediately ask the follow-up question and have them burrow in even deeper on those multiple working hypotheses. So the descriptions are not just great to clue us into what they're seeing, but it really helps us in real time maximize the science we're getting out of, in this case, a 7-hour flyby.
I'd like to just comment real quickly on one of my favorite. It wasn't actually a lunar observation, but it was during the eclipse, and they were looking at the planets that could be seen. You could see Mercury, Mars, and Saturn.
And Venus, yeah.
And Venus on the other side,
Yep.
yeah. But they were looking at the planets, and I can't remember who said it, said one of them looks kind of red, and Kelsey's observation was, that's Mars, you're looking at your future. And I thought that was spectacular.
We only have time for a couple more questions, so I'll pass it over to you, Jonathan, and then we'll do one more.
Thank you. Jonathan Seri with Fox News. I would love to know about the logistics that went into the ship-to-ship call. If you could explain in layman's terms, how did it work out? And perhaps more importantly, what was the symbolic impact of that call?
So the logistics, we have done a number of public affairs events on integrity throughout the mission. We do them multiple times a week on the space station, and everything goes through Houston. So the data comes through the Deep Space Network, through the Jet Propulsion Laboratory over to Houston. We have audio and video technicians here in Mission Control who can reconfigure the routes for the data and send it to the appropriate destination. We do public affairs events down from the ISS through the tracking and data relay satellite system, and so that's something we do all the time. It's just a matter of connecting the two wires, and so logistics were really quite easy despite the distances.
Yeah, maybe I could add too, I was in the flight control room this morning for that call, and something I observed that I didn't anticipate, of course we're expecting the crew joy at talking and connecting to each other, but looking around the room at the other flight controllers, and actually the viewing gallery was open for other FOD employees to observe. This is a team sport, so many people, thousands of people work to enable this, and seeing the joy on everybody's faces as these two missions flying at the same time had this moment of connection is going to stay with me as a moment of inspiration from this mission.
Yeah, and I would just add, in terms of it being symbolic, it is certainly a step in the right direction. It began with a single person in a Mercury spacecraft, and we progressed to 2 spacecraft at one time. Now we've got an international space station while a spacecraft is coming back from the moon. This is progress. We talk a lot about, what is an interesting KPI, the number of people living and working in space. We want to see that number grow. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we've got communication going on between our moon base, their colleagues that are orbiting above them in a lander, relaying back maybe to other colleagues on an international or future commercial space station. These are all steps in the right direction for the exciting future that many of us were probably imagined as children and we're trying to bring into reality.
We're going to do last question.
Hi, Dr. Allison McGraw, Mysterious Meteorites from here in Houston, Texas, for Lunar Science Lead Kelsey Young. Are there going to be any science data available of perhaps the color data for the impact flashes or trajectory directions they came from?
I asked the crew about that this morning. Any color? How long did they last? Where were they? And Reed and Jeremy, as I was talking to them, had their crew tablets out and they were making annotations and sketches on what they saw. They did just report this morning in our conversation that they didn't observe any color to them and that they were very, very brief, but they did provide sketches on whereabout they saw them. And so again, like I said, we're going to use the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter to try to, track to those features and try to identify what they saw. Trajectory is going to be hard, but Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter data can help us pull that out. What we really wanted to do before the crew, splashed down and got distracted with all of the things they're going to be doing here was capture that nuance before it got overcome by a lot of other mission events. So we were able to capture a lot more detail this morning in my conversation with them, and the LRO team is off to the races.
Great. With that, thank you for joining us today for our mission status briefing. We will have another briefing tomorrow. Until then, you can continue to follow along with the mission 24/7 on NASA's YouTube channel, and we will leave you with these beautiful images captured by Integrity.